And at this moment, I knew I was screwed. Hey filmmakers, today I'm going to show you 4 unique gimbal moves that you can start using today to really level up the production value of your next video. Gimbals have been out for a while now, and there's a good chance that you've been using one for a couple years. And you probably know all the basic moves like following someone, doing a parallax, getting low mode, but the moves that I'm going to show you today are not very common. So let's jump into a video that I made using these 4 unique gimbal moves right now, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the behind the scenes on how we shot it and everything like that, so that you can walk away from this video being able to do the exact same things. Break this down shot for shot on how I made each segment of this video. The whole scene starts out with the model riding her bicycle towards the camera with the sunset behind her. Now for this, I could have just taken the gimbal and walked or ran backwards with it, but we didn't want to do that because I wanted to avoid a lot of that up and down motion that you get when you're using a gimbal. It just looks really ugly. So instead, to really keep up with the speed of the bicycle and also keep the shot as smooth as possible, we decided that we would shoot it out of the back of my truck. Now, a huge part of what made getting these shots so simple and easy to do was actually this gimbal, and this is the Feiyutech AK4000, and it actually has a ring mount that goes around it. And so what we did was actually hold it from the top so you could hang it down really low to the ground and make it look like the road is passing by really quickly and that the bike is coming at you a lot faster. Now, of course, if you don't have that ring, you can also use the gimbal in standard single-handed mode, and that allows you to basically just flip it upside down like this. And we could have held it out the back of the truck like this as well, you know, with 1 or 2 hands on it like this. So a couple key tips to keep in mind when you're filming out the back of a truck or a car: make sure that you're doing it on a road that it's safe to do it on. We were doing this in a closed, gated community where there really wasn't any traffic going through or pedestrians. I would, of course, never recommend doing this on a freeway or a normal highway street with a bunch of cars and traffic on it. That's just not safe. Be smart if you're gonna use a car to film out of. Also, you might get stopped by the cops if you're hanging out the back of a car with the camera out in the middle of a public road. Now, we filmed all the gimbal shots using my Sony a6500 with the Sigma 16mm lens. Now, when it comes to focusing on a gimbal, there are of course a lot of ways that you can do it. You can manually focus with like the Tilta Nucleus Nano, which sometimes I do, but it can be pretty difficult to keep up with your subject, especially at a shallow depth of field. Or you could set your focus to infinity and really stop down and just keep the right distance from your subject. But for me, when I'm doing gimbal shots, I usually rely on autofocus because it actually works really well on the Sony a6500, and a lot of times it can do much better than I can doing manual focusing. So the only thing that I really did here was make sure to get some nice foreground from the tree in the shot to really give it a little bit more depth and dimension. For this next shot, I wanted to have more of a continuous take and make it feel like the camera is just flowing along with no boundaries or anything like that. So we had our model walk to the door into the backyard, and we actually passed the gimbal from the inside through a window to the outside, and I took it the rest of the way with her up to the pool. This is a really easy shot to do. It just takes 2 people passing it off through a window, and of course, you can do this in all types of scenarios where you pass off the gimbal to another person. And this is just a really simple way to easily level up your production value. The next shot was definitely the riskiest thing I've ever done with my camera. So we built an entire rig so that the camera could really float over the water. So what I did was actually use the crossbar that I used for hanging my paper backdrops, and I taped all the segments of it together to make sure that it didn't like twist loose and fall apart. And I just zip tied the death out of it to that pole so that it would not fall fall off. And as a final safety, I gaff taped it a bunch as well so that the zip ties wouldn't slide around. Now, some of you may be thinking, wow, that's like a really overly complicated setup for getting that shot. You could have just stood in the middle of the pool or something like that. Maybe we could have done that, but I don't think that would have been safe, especially if I slipped or something like that and the gimbal and whole camera rig just dove right into the water. But as you saw at the beginning of this video, the camera did have a little bit of a fatality and got completely wet, even with me trying to prevent that. But we'll get into that in just a minute here. So with all this set up, me and Tyler stood on either side of the pool, and then as she's diving off the diving board towards the camera, we backed the camera up. Now, the movement wasn't as long as I wanted it to be. I really would have liked to have like a really long, like 6-foot travel, but where we were standing was really sketchy. I actually had to stand in the pool on one of the steps, and then Tyler was standing in a bunch of rocks. If the pool had just like a normal deck on either side, we really could have like ran with it. I think there's a lot of potential here, especially if you're gonna make an advertisement for a pool company or something like that. You can make it look like you have an entire crane or something when really it's just a gimbal strapped to a really long pole. Now, there were two really scary moments with this rig. One was when the rig was getting passed back to me. I didn't realize that there was a ton of weight on it and it just goes almost like fell in the water like that. I had to crank it back up. The other was when we were getting a final shot of our model jumping into the pool and it just sent this huge splash wave right at the camera, and immediately I knew it was coming because it just hit the lens, and you already saw the shot. It got completely wasted. Now, the good thing is I'm actually filming on that same lens and camera right now. It survived. For the final shot of this segment, I attached the gimbal to a monopod. Now, I've made an entire video about this before. There's a lot of cool ways that you can use a monopod and a gimbal together because it just becomes a massive handheld crane, and I absolutely love it. But for this shot, I wanted her just floating out in the middle of the pool, and I wanted a really cool bird's eye view top down. I just held out the monopod overhead out over the pool, which again is kind of terrifying because you don't want the gimbal to fall off of the monopod. Luckily, it's a pretty good sturdy connection. My monopod is from Manfrotto and it has a really good 1/4-20 thread on there that's super solid and it's not gonna break off. Also, this is a really light setup using the A6500 with this gimbal, and I'm not really worried about it cracking off or breaking or anything like that. Now, if you're attaching a Ronin S and a large like A7S II and a big heavy lens, I probably wouldn't recommend putting it on a monopod. There is a chance that it'll break off and hit the ground and you will cry when all of your equipment breaks. So with this gimbal and monopod combination, you could get tons of really unique and cool shots. I really only showed you one here. Now, I want to dive even deeper into this whole topic and talk about the gimbal that made all the magic come to life, and that is the Feiyutech AK4000. So there's a lot of really unique features about this that I have not seen before. And I've used a ton of gimbals like the Ronin S, the Ronin M, the Zion Crane, the Mosas, a whole bunch of gimbals, but this thing is really starting to grow on me and I'm finding myself reaching for it more and more. Time out, before I get into all the specs and features of this cool gimbal, I want to quickly talk about the new merch. So if you haven't already noticed, I'm wearing a robot using a gimbal. Now, have you ever seen anything like this before?
No.
Because I personally designed it and then had an artist bring it all to life. All right, back to the gimbal. The Feiyutech AK4000 is a beast of a gimbal. It can actually hold a full 8.8 pounds or 4 kilograms. Something that immediately amazes me about this gimbal is actually how small and light it is for the amount of weight that it can hold. And I'm used to running around with the Ronin S all day, and it is a very, very heavy gimbal. So moving right along, one of the coolest features on this is honestly this little touchscreen LCD on the back. It's perfect because I can see exactly what mode I'm in, whether I'm in horizontal lock, tilt follow, all follow, any of those features. And of course I can change all the settings here too. So you can swipe from left to right or right to left and get right into the different settings. You can calibrate it, change the motor speeds, all the things that you need to do. And you can even connect your camera to the gimbal using Bluetooth and actually control a lot of the camera settings from the gimbal. Another simple but really nice feature to have is actually the battery indicator, so you can tell how much battery left is on the gimbal. Another thing that I love about this gimbal is actually the joystick, because it's flat. It allows me to keep my thumb in a nice ergonomic position. The Ronin S little button sticks way out and causes my thumb to cramp. Mine didn't actually come with the focus motor, but you can buy the focus motor separately and get it all set up and then control your focus manually here. But if you don't have that, you can actually control the gimbal with this wheel as well, which I really like. You can tap this setting over here on the side and it'll allow you to tilt up and down with this wheel. Phaotech has taken a page out of the handbook from the Ronin S and put the trigger on the front, which I actually love, because let's say that you've got the gimbal all off skew, but there's something really cool in front of you that you want to shoot right now. You just double tap that trigger and it goes right back to home base, which I love and I use all the time on the Ronin S. So I was super happy to see that they have that same feature here. Now let's talk about actually mounting the camera to the gimbal itself. And I really like the way that they've done this. You don't need a penny or a screwdriver or anything like that to remove it like you usually do on other Manfrotto plates. Another great feature of this plate is that it actually has a riser portion to it, meaning that it gets the camera up a little bit higher and leaves some space for the lens. There are a couple more features that really make this gimbal stand apart, and my favorite one is absolutely the ability to put this into the dual handle ring grip. And this doesn't come with all the AK4000s, but if you look on Amazon, there are a lot of little combo deals that you can get where this is included and it doesn't actually cost more. This actual top part breaks off, this bottom part breaks off, and they each go into the ring itself. And it gives you 2 mounting spots, which I absolutely love, because every time I'm using a gimbal, I'm using a monitor. Another fantastic feature of it is these little feet. I love them because you can set your gimbal down. Now, before, when I was using like the Ronin M, it was absolutely terrible because you have to bring that dumb stand with you, get it all set up so you can put your gimbal down. That's the absolute worst. No one travels with a stand, especially when you're trying to do run and gun filmmaking. One small downside with the ring setup is the fact that it doesn't fit into the case. The whole gimbal does in its single mode configuration, but this ring doesn't have a case that it comes with, so you got to throw it into another bag or Pelican. Another feature that I've really been loving with this gimbal is the all follow mode. So first off, it's really easy to get into from the touchscreen on the back. Just tap into it, and then because it's in this ring shape, you can just rotate it around. It also comes with a little extension rod, so when you're using it in the single grip configuration, you can just screw it onto the bottom and it becomes like a little monopod. And of course, there's an entire app from Phaotech that you can use to really fine-tune this gimbal, fine-tune the motor strength, the speed that it pans and tilts at, all those little tiny things that you can dial in from the app. So I've ranted and raved about this gimbal for a while now. Let's talk about some of the cons or little things that I found to be a little bit off with it. I found that if I get a little bit too crazy and wacky with the gimbal moves I'm doing, the gimbal itself can kind of freak out. So if I start kind of spinning it and flipping it around, it'll just start shaking like you just saw, or maybe it'll flip over and just freak out. But that's because I'm really kind of abusing and mistreating the gimbal and just like really flipping it around way too crazy. If you're using this like a normal human being, that's not gonna happen. Another little quirk is actually the trigger on the back. So if you hold it down, it goes right into tilt mode, which is a really cool feature to have if you wanna use it. But I kept accidentally hitting this button on the back and I didn't even realize it. And it just kept driving me crazy because I was like, I just wanna pan, I don't wanna tilt. But as soon as I figured out what was going on with that, I just adjusted my grip so it was lower and wasn't hitting the button. Honestly, besides those 2 little things, I haven't found any other issues with it, and I've been very impressed with this gimbal. So if you want to pick one up, definitely check out the link in the description below. And I want to say a special thanks to the guys over at Phaotech for sending this out for review. They did not pay me to say any of this, hashtag not sponsored. And if you want to learn how to light and shoot better videos, hit subscribe right now. I have a ton more videos coming out on shooting, editing, everything like that. And go check out the new merch, a ton of really cool designs that you guys are gonna love. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.